Hello, and welcome to another edition of Auto Innovators Future Driven Forum. My name is Tara Hairston, and I serve as the Senior Director for Technology Policy here at the Association. Today's webinar will dive into the importance of intellectual property rights to automotive innovation and the transition to a cleaner, safer, and smarter transportation future. First, we will be joined by Ram Mistry, a patent attorney in the Office of Policy and International Affairs at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, or USPTO. Ram joined USPTO as a patent examiner in 2007. After obtaining his Juris Doctorate from George Washington University, Ram started his solo practice in estate law. He joined USPTO's Office of Policy and International Affairs in 2022, focusing primarily on global industrial design, various international cooperation organizations, implementation of the CHIPS and Science Act, and IP-related work in the Southeast Asia region. Ram is an avid car enthusiast who enjoys working on cars and keeping up with the latest developments in the automotive industry. And in addition to his Juris Doctorate, Ram has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Florida. Ram, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. So let's start with some foundational questions. What is the United States Patent and Trademark Office?
Yes. So I'm sure much of your viewer base is likely familiar with the USPTO, but I'll give a brief background. So the USPTO is a bureau within the Department of Commerce that grants patents, registers trademarks, and advises the U.S. government on IP policy, intellectual property policy. The USPTO advises the President of the United States, the Secretary of Commerce, and other U.S. government agencies on IP policy, protection, and enforcement. Now, of course, the examination function of the USPTO is very well known. We have patent and trademark examiners that examine applications that are filed with the USPTO. For decades now, the USPTO has focused on improving the quality and efficiency of the examination process. But beyond that, and more specific to my role here, the USPTO handles IP policy for all IP rights, so including patents, which includes utility and design patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. So the overall mission of the USPTO is to drive U.S. innovation and competitiveness, and in doing so, the USPTO supports U.S. economic growth and national security. And globally, the USPTO stands as an example of a strong IP rights system and represents the U.S. IP policy in international forums. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And of course, there's a lot more that could be mentioned here, but a good resource is our website, uspto.gov.
Fantastic, thank you. You started to give a little bit about your current role with the Office of Policy and International Affairs. Can you tell us a bit more about what you do there?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a patent attorney in the Office of Policy and International Affairs, or for short, we call it OPIA. So at OPIA, we advise Director Kathy Vidal and the U.S. government as a whole on domestic and international IP policy. Within OPIA, we have a few teams. We have a trademark team, enforcement team, copyright team, and a patents team that I work on. Most of us are attorneys, and like you mentioned earlier, some of us were examiners before as well, so we sort of bring that perspective to this job. OPIA, again, wears a lot of hats here, but we work very closely with IP offices around the world to improve the efficiency of the global patent system. We represent the United States in many multilateral frameworks through which we engage in collaboration, unification efforts, data and work sharing. The complete list, again, would be very long, but just an example of some forums. So we work, for example, in IP5, which is a meeting of the 5 largest IP offices in the world from the US, Europe, China, Japan, and Korea. We also work with ID5, which is the same forum, but for designs. We also work extensively on WIPO treaties and working groups such as SCT, IGC, PCT, SCP. We love our acronyms, so we have a ton of those. And we work with international organizations and also closely with different regions of the world. And so we have a breakdown, in fact, of every region of the world that's divided up, and we work very closely with those regions on U.S. policy as it applies to those regions. We consult with foreign governments on enforcement laws and procedures to help support the IP rights of United States nationals. So in short, OPIA works on domestic and international policy, improving the efficiency of global IP protection.
Fantastic. You talked about this as well a little bit in your opening about how intellectual property rights are often discussed in the context of the innovation economy. Innovation is so important to economic and national security. What is the role of intellectual property rights in fostering innovation?
Yes, so to understand the role of IP in fostering innovation, I think we have to first look at where innovation comes from. So innovation stems from, of course, research and development. It comes from inventors, from entrepreneurs, people that see a need in the market and then envision a solution for that need. And IP rewards the successful conclusion of that endeavor. But of course, there are multiple facets to this. So there's the issue of funding. Innovation is driven in general by public and private funding. So maybe initially we have public funding that drives innovation, but then towards the end, maybe private funding takes over. But IP rights in this system provide a means to recover this investment and offset this risk of research and development and the cost of bringing this product to the market. We see IP rights as an incentive that's necessary to encourage participation in this market and to undertake the risk of product research and development. One common phenomenon that we see, they're called second mover advantages. And so the first entity to bring an invention to market, they must expend, of course, a lot of resources. They have to identify the demand. They have to develop the product, bear the risks of bringing that market to product, and not to mention the financial burden behind all of this. But a second entity can observe the success of this first product and very quickly replicate that product at a fraction of the cost. So IP rights thwart some of these second mover advantages by granting a limited monopoly on certain new, non-obvious, useful inventions, ensuring a market share for the first mover. But of course, this is not for free. There is a very important quid pro quo for this limited monopoly. IP rights holders are given these rights in exchange for an enabling disclosure that teaches a person of ordinary skill in the art how to make and use the invention. So the information that's contained in the patent application becomes public knowledge in general. So not only can this disclosure then be freely exploited once the patent expires, but it also contributes to the progress of science by allowing others to build on the knowledge that would otherwise just be held confidential. So in the US, we certainly believe in a very strong IP system. We are very strong proponents of that. We've seen a rapid development in pharmaceuticals, of course, in the automotive industry, and the commercial space industry. Really, a lot of industries are just taking off. And we believe that all of this was incentivized, at least in part, by a strong IP system.
Great. You talked about, particularly as you were discussing the role of OPIA, about USPTO's role globally as it relates to IP policy. How does the USPTO work to advance intellectual property rights protection? You mentioned that we are, by nature of the system, conveying a limited monopoly to the first mover, the inventor. What else is being done at USPTO to advance intellectual property rights, whether patent or otherwise?
Yeah, excellent. There's so much, and so I've tried to narrow this down a little bit. But the USPTO, so also known as America's Innovation Agency, I believe takes a very holistic approach in furthering IP protection. So, of course, initially I mentioned the extensive work done by USPTO on domestic and global IP policy, but the primary function of the USPTO that I think most people are familiar with is patent examination, right? It's very central to its mission of bolstering US innovation. So I'll try to talk about some of the facets that I think make this holistic. So of course, patent examiners easily make up the majority of USPTO employees. And so by issuing valid patents in a timely and efficient manner, of course, this is a key deliverable of the USPTO. But beyond that, the USPTO is really trying to expand the innovation demographic So the USPTO focuses heavily on domestic outreach in an attempt to draw new inventors into the IP ecosystem. And there are many such programs I want to mention too, because they do a very good job of showcasing our recent outreach efforts. One very strong example is the Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative. So this is a community-focused program that taps into the immense potential of female entrepreneurs who, as of 2020, represent the fastest growing category of entrepreneurship worldwide. So this has been a very, very strong push from the USPTO. And another is the Unleashing American Innovators Act, so UAIA, which, among other things, serves to lower the barriers of entry into the innovation ecosystem. This has been also very successful. So this program targets a very wide audience of communities that are traditionally underrepresented in the IP ecosystem. And what we do is not only do we directly outreach with these communities, but we also establish user-friendly resources designed for those that are less familiar with IP. So we're really opening this up to everybody as much as possible. On the topic of fees, for example, we have reduced fees for small and micro entities. So for small entities, it's 60% reduction of fees, and for micro entities, it's an 80% reduction in fees. Beyond that, we also offer pro bono legal services through the Patent Pro Bono program and the Law School Clinic Certification Program to even further lower these costs. And so a strong focus, as I said, of the USPTO's outreach has been to develop this awareness for inventors that these resources are available, and we want to ensure everyone has an equal footing in the IP ecosystem. As I mentioned, there's a lot, but last but not least, one last focus of the USPTO is enforcing rights that are granted. So the USPTO has an IP attaché program. So we have IP attachés around the world that assist US stakeholders to protect and enforce their IP rights abroad. These are experts in the laws, of course, in the territories in which they work. We have, I mean, it's proper boots on the ground. They engage with everyone there on a day-to-day basis, and they're very instrumental in protecting IP in foreign markets. So OPIA works very closely with these IP attachés to perform our regional policy work, because they're often in the best position to advocate for the benefit of US stakeholders. So they've, over the years, assisted US companies to combat counterfeiting, digital piracy, and unauthorized use of IP, and facilitated cooperation. So in summary, while the USPTO does spend most of its resources in granting IP rights to individuals and companies, it is also very committed to helping US entities enforce those rights after they are granted.
You talk a bit about the different kind of constituencies in terms of expanding the pool of innovators. You know, the programs you mentioned, the Women in Entrepreneurship program and yes. Others. How does USPTO work with other organizations? You know, in the automotive industry doesn't tend to have a lot of small and micro entities, but there may be some, you know, that are in the supply chain. So just kind of curious, how do you work with maybe slightly larger entities that are in the automotive industry?
With larger entities, it's less about outreach for awareness, because of course they're very well aware of the protections available, but it's really working closely with them for the last part that I mentioned, the enforcement of the rights, because in automotives in particular, the aftermarket market is very large, and to enforce rights there, as we've spoken to a few companies in the past, is very difficult to do. And so we really try to hear their concerns, and then through, as I said, our IP attaché system, through our foreign engagement with foreign governments, we really try to ensure these IP rights are actually upheld in these countries. And so manufacturing, for example, if an auto company wants to begin manufacturing in some Southeast Asia country, for example, they'll go there and of course they'll try to do this, but there are going to be a lot of local barriers along the way for enforcing these rights, because there's going to be counterfeiting, piracy, all that. And so for that, that's where we come in and really start engaging with the IP attachés, with other local offices to ensure that these rights are in fact upheld. And so this has been, in fact, quite a bit of work on this front, as you can imagine. So of course we have the outreach, as you said, but there's a lot of work on this front as we engage with the rest of the world.
Definitely. So I get to ask you some fun questions now. Just out of curiosity, do you have a favorite car, and if so, what is it?
Oh my goodness, that is a very difficult question to answer. That has changed many times throughout my life, and I suspect it will continue to change. But in addition to, of course, really liking cars, I really like to work on them. I like to really race them, and so it would probably be something along those lines. I really cannot decide. This is a very difficult question to ask a car enthusiast.
Are there any particular automotive innovations that you're particularly excited about? Like I mentioned at the outset, we are really seeing a transformation in the transportation industry. We're seeing automation, electrification, decarbonization, connectivity, anything that's really kind of top of mind for you in terms of the innovations that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, I'll start actually with the more objective answer along the lines of what you were saying, and then I'll talk about maybe personally what I'm excited about. Objectively, just as you mentioned, the amount of innovation is simply immense, right? Innovation in EV technology has grown so exponentially in recent years. I don't imagine a decade ago anyone would have predicted the current market share of EVs. I don't think anyone could have guessed this is where we would be. And hand in hand with the growth of EVs has been the progressive utilization of AI in vehicles. So driver training, full autonomous driving, right? Or at least pursuing full autonomous driving. The growth has been immense. In fact, the innovation is so fast that it's almost hard to keep up with the innovation, because the way I see this innovation developing, it's through independently developing fields of technology that feed into automotive innovation that may not be related to each other. So for example, advances in image analysis, for example, in camera systems, and AI can work with advances in drivetrain responsiveness and tire compound technology to result in a comprehensively better vehicle. Right. So it's really hard to comprehend, let alone predict what the future of this convergence will be. But now the subjective answer, personally, as I said, I like to work on cars. I like to race them. I really like to hone my skills as a driver. Really, in an alternate life, I'd be wearing a helmet to work. But that did not happen. But automotive innovation in this field, in the field of racing, has in itself sort of reached its own new incomprehensible goals. So not only from blistering track records, or every year some new record is broken and it's just hard to imagine how, to safety advances that in racing has saved many lives that in days past those lives would have been lost. And these advances, of course, within the world of racing are very exciting, but in some ways they also trickle down to technology that's used in road legal vehicles, right? So we're not saying parts are directly used in road legal vehicles necessarily, but the engineering mindset, I think, that leads to innovation shares the same roots as this. Another exciting field for me personally, so in addition to pure EVs, has been the development of hybrid engines. Very surprisingly, despite they've been around for decades, innovation in this field has focused on quite a bit for hybrid engines. So not only just the engine, the drivetrain, and how it functions seamlessly, gas and electric power, but power regeneration and recovery. So battery efficiency has gone up significantly in past years. Kinetic energy recovery systems have been phenomenal in recent times. In fact, hybrid engines have come so far that in 2014, in F1 race cars, Formula One race cars, the V8 engine was dropped and replaced with a turbocharged V6 that included this energy recovery system. So it's, in effect, it's sort of a hybrid system, and that car has been just setting records all over the place. And one last thing that, again, for me personally, and I'll explain why, has been very interesting, is the convergence between general technological innovation and automotive innovation, because technological innovation in general has been a double-edged sword, I think, for the automotive industry. So most commonly, distracted driving has been a progressively growing issue, and now it's perhaps at an all-time high. And so innovation in sort of phone technology, right, digital technology there has had a perhaps negative impact, right, certainly in automotive safety. And so innovation in automotive safety sort of goes hand in hand with this growing system. So accident prevention systems, driver alert systems, fortunately are ubiquitous in new vehicles. But when I was a patent examiner, I personally examined many applications in the image analysis and display fields that focused on driver safety. So for example, camera systems that work in tandem with biometric sensors to ensure driver awareness, road object identification. There were some that dealt with optical adjustments to the windshield to draw the user's attention to specific objects on the road. So it was very exciting, continues to be very exciting to work in this field and see which inventions make it to market, how they're implemented, and how they end up making it to market. So as I said before, there's a near endless stream of automotive innovation these days. I don't think anyone can predict how the industry will look in 5, 10, 15 years. So there's quite a lot to be excited about.
Fantastic. Well, you just gave us a really great segue to our additional speakers and talking about the different types of innovation that are happening in the automotive industry. But first, Ron, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your remarks. It was great to have you share your perspective on automotive innovation, learn a little bit more about what USPTO does, what the Office of Policy and International Affairs does as well. So thank you.
Thank you again for this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye. Well, now we will be joined by two industry representatives who will delve more deeply into the role of intellectual property rights in automotive innovation. Please allow me to introduce Mark Duell with American Honda Motor Company and Tom Ubernitzky with Ford Motor Company. Gentlemen, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Great.
Thanks, Tara.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Let me just do some brief introductions with bios, and then we'll get into our questions. So Mark serves as Senior Corporate Counsel in the Law and Intellectual Property Unit at American Honda Motor Co., Inc., where he specializes in intellectual property law. He has worked extensively in matters involving patent preparation and prosecution, litigation, trade secrets, opinions, counseling, export controls, contracts, and licensing. He earned his Juris Doctorate and his Bachelor of Science degree in physics from The Ohio State University. Tom is a senior intellectual property attorney for Ford Motor Company, where he handles Ford's intellectual property agreements, intellectual property infringement threats, and management of patent prosecution in key technology areas. Prior to joining Ford, he was in private practice for over 10 years, where he handled high-tech and high-stakes patent litigation matters in a variety of forums. And prior to his legal career, Tom was a submarine officer in the U.S. Navy serving on board the USS Hawaii. Mark, Tom, thank you both for being here today.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
So let's jump in. As we discussed with Ron, we are witnessing a transition to a cleaner, safer, and smarter transportation future. From your perspective, what role does innovation play in that transition? Tom?
I think innovation is the key to making the transportation cleaner, safer, smarter, making that transition happen, whether it's the development of new technologies or just improvements on existing technologies. Innovation is the path to the future for that cleaner, safer, smarter transportation world. Innovation is creating the cleaner transportation when we look at the transition to hybrid and EV vehicles, which is then reducing the emissions that we're putting out in the environment. Innovation is also making transportation more safer, especially as we get in, discuss all the new innovations that Ram talked about, the passive and active safety features, and as we move to more autonomous control methods that will help drivers or even replace drivers altogether. And then going towards smarter vehicles, that innovation is going hand in hand with that. The smartness of the vehicle is innovation. So having the vehicles be smarter is also making them safer, but it's also making them more fun and more enjoyable for users as you integrate cellular, Wi-Fi, and infotainment systems into the vehicle. So innovation is just the key to making all three of those things happen.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Well, Tom, you spoke about, a number of the innovations that are happening in the industry today, but just kind of curious if you all both would like to share anything about how your companies are innovating. Mark, anything from Honda that you'd like to share with the group?
Sure. We continue to use the traditional research model where our engineers, scientists are coming up with new ideas and researching it themselves. But we also have expanded that to include partnerships with other OEMs on new technologies that are important for our electrified future, things like charging and connectivity of vehicles. We also, partner with established suppliers on new technologies, but we also spend a lot of time now partnering with new companies with emerging technologies that are not traditional players in the automotive space. There are many large companies that are very well known that you don't think of being automotive suppliers, but we still are partnering with them. Companies like LG or Google, they that help us with our vehicles. And then we're also partnering with smaller companies. We have an accelerator in Silicon Valley where small companies, startups, individual inventors can bring ideas and work on them. And so it runs the gamut from, like I said, the partnerships with the other OEMs all the way down to small companies that we continue to work with to develop new technologies.
Great. Yeah, I think folks continue to be surprised by the breadth and depth of the partnerships that the automotive industry continues to pursue when it comes to innovation, like, having accelerators or opportunities in Silicon Valley, the typical kind of engine of innovation, but also partnering amongst each other and with other technology companies and others in the supply chain. I think that that's really great that you gave us an overview of how these partnerships are being pursued by a company. Tom, I want to ask you about, and you touched upon this in your first answer, but why is innovation so important to the automotive industry? We know that obviously technology provides additional benefits to the users environmentally, from a safety perspective, and then obviously from a connectivity perspective, but why is innovation so important to our industry?
Like you said, I think it goes back to mostly due to what we just discussed. It's making the vehicles cleaner, safer, smarter. And as Ram kind of led into with us, the amount of innovation that's going on right now in the vehicle space is just, it's very fast. It's very, it's just taking off, and it's many different facets. Before the vehicles, you had the engines, you had the body, and that was pretty much about it there, but now, in addition to that, still having engine and still having body innovation, you have the autonomous driving innovation, you have the infotainment technology innovation, you have the safer autonomous driving, capabilities, and you have the complete switch to EV, which is a whole, almost industry of it in and of itself, which involves, battery technologies. So innovation right now in the automotive space is, I would dare to say, more important than it's ever been in its history, not going back to like 1920, but in recent history, it's definitely the key component to what's really driving the industry as a whole.
Well, we've talked about innovation and obviously recognizing its important role in the industry. Let's talk about now shift into intellectual property rights, what I discussed with Ram. Mark, I'd be curious, how does intellectual property help foster automotive innovation? What role does IP have in this innovation ecosystem as it relates to automotive?
Well, first of all, as Ron mentioned, there's a trade-off. When you get a patent, you're providing information about your invention. You're teaching others how to use your invention. So that growth of the information base from which you can start thinking about what other things you can do. You can identify where kind of the white spaces are, where innovation is possible. And then so there's that teaching effect, but it also offers protection for your investments in research and development. Honda spends millions of dollars in research and development in the US alone. And you want to be able to protect that investment, so that you're comfortable spending that money to do the research. And then it also is an incentive to innovate. If you have the opportunity to protect your ideas, the incentive to go ahead and spend the money, you can go ahead and feel free to do the research and put the product out there, knowing that you have the ability to protect those inventions in the marketplace, so you can recoup your investments.
Yeah, it's really so important that we recognize the incentivization of innovation is a key role that intellectual property plays in the ecosystem, and why it's so important to our national and economic security. We heard from Ram earlier that the USPTO works to further intellectual property rights protection. So how do your companies tend to engage with USPTO? We know how they engage with entities that are rights holders, but how do you engage with the USPTO or the US Patent and Trademark Office?
Well, we're a large innovator, so we file hundreds of patent applications every year. So we engage with the patent office first as a customer, working to get patents approved by the office, so we can obtain patents. There are opportunities to engage the office when there are disputes. If you think somebody has been granted a patent that they shouldn't have been granted because the PTO, operating on sometimes limited resources, misses prior art, you have the possibility to ask the PTO, either through the re-exam process or its post-grant review processes, to reconsider a patent. It's particularly efficient in litigation. And we engage the PTO in those avenues. And then we also have outreach with the PTO on policy issues. Through Auto Innovators, we discuss with the PTO when they request comments on rulemaking, if they have questions for the industry. I know a number of companies in the industry have provided teaching days, tours for the PTO, so the examiners are able to learn more about the technologies involved in the auto industry. And then we've also reached out and spoken with the director of the PTO, so that they understand our positions on patent policy, whether it be on the prosecution side with the patent laws, interpretations of patent eligibility and obviousness and stuff like that, and also our view of how the Patent Trial and Appeal Board operates. So we are frequently discussing with them how to do that, and then we have talked to members of Congress on Capitol Hill, who also work with the PTO, the committees that involved with PTO oversight, and the people who are responsible for writing the patent laws, to make sure that it remains a key for innovation, that the patent laws don't drift one way or the other. We're trying to keep them centered, so that innovation continues to be promoted.
Yeah, it's so important, I think, to your point, Mark, about kind of a balanced approach to patent policy. As you mentioned, the automotive industry are large patent holders, but at the same time, there's a lot of litigation that automotive companies face, alleging infringement of patents. And there's a lot of public policy discussions around these types of issues. And we know there's some kind of natural constituencies, some core constituencies that the US Patent and Trademark Office tends to engage when it comes to patent policy. But the automotive industry is a key stakeholder as well, given our contributions to the innovation ecosystem. What other ways can public policy or IP policy specifically impact automotive innovation? Tom, do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, I do. There's many ways that public policy affects innovation through the patent offices, procedures, the mechanisms that they provide for both getting and defending patent infringement threats, or just getting patents in innovative areas that we're spending millions of dollars in research trying to innovate in those industries. And taking, for example, the patent office's PTAB, the public policy there, there's legislation currently being considered that could possibly limit what and who can bring cases in the PTAB against patents. And without having that ability and that freedom to really defend ourselves in the PTAB, we'll then have to do that in more expensive and more time-consuming places, like district courts or the ITC. These are just resources that could be better used in innovation, and we can get much more efficient and cheaper and faster results at the PTAB if that stays open to us for all the times we want it to be able to. And I guess another example for public policy impact on the automotive industry, one big one is in the standard essential patent space, which probably could be, there is whole webinars just on that issue alone. But in terms of these large patent pools, or groups of people that are collecting standard essential patents, or what they allege to be standard essential patents, then they come to the automotive industry and demand large sums of money, while not really providing any transparency to how they get to those numbers, or something that will provide a fair transaction. So public policies, for example, what we're seeing in Europe, can be used to help make these patent pools and these standard essential patent assertion entities more fair and transparent in how they interact with the automotive industry and industry as a whole.
I want to pick up on that, Tom. So my understanding when it comes to standard essential patent is that it is a patent that has been used, or a patent that's been granted for technology that's been integrated into a technical standard. And those standards are things for very ubiquitous technology like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, things of that nature, that if you want to incorporate that technology, you have to license a patent. Is that correct?
Generally, yes. It would be nice if there was one patent on 4G and we could license that one 4G patent, but instead there's 25,000 patents that all those who got those patents say they all are essential to the standard. So how does Ford or Honda or any auto innovator get to use 4G without having to worry about a bunch of companies coming at them saying, oh, we have some. So there's the patent pools that kind of collect and they say, hey, we have them all, but they don't have them all. And then, what they're requesting is generally a much larger sum of money than most would think. And they kind of just say, take it or leave it, and don't really give you the transparency to really negotiate and come to a fair consensus on what is that worth to the vehicle, and what is that worth to, in general terms of patent, allocation of the technology to the vehicle as a whole.
And Mark, you talked about a little bit in terms of, well, both of you mentioned the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, or the PTAB. But Mark, you mentioned kind of like the trial proceedings before the PTAB. Obviously, there's many venues in which IP rights are litigated. We've already talked about district court. What is special about the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, or the mechanisms that USPTO has when it comes to patents?
The PTAB, for starters, when the Patent Trial and Appeal Board is reviewing these patents, they're being reviewed by experts, so they have understanding of the technology, perhaps better than a lay jury in a district court somewhere. Also, the PTAB proceedings typically move much faster than your typical district court docket. The costs associated with proceedings at the PTAB are much less expensive than district court litigation, and you have better faith in the results, that the PTAB is going to come to the correct result. The patent office generally does a fine job in examining patents the first time they go through. But like I said, the examiners have limited resources and limited time to review patents, and patents that should not have been granted get through. And the PTAB provides an efficient mechanism for dealing with those patents so that they don't start to creep in and harm innovation by allowing patent holders that shouldn't have patents to hold up the industry.
Great. Well, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about patents because that's kind of both of your specialty. I think I just want to share with the audience that, the automotive industry has a number of different forms of IP. One area that we didn't mention, but that Ram alluded to, is trademark enforcement, particularly as it relates to anti-counterfeiting. Unfortunately, counterfeit automotive parts continues to be an issue, and oftentimes it is the counterfeiters using the trademark of the automotive companies to pass off their goods as authentic. So there's obviously a lot of work between industry and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and other agencies within the government when it comes to anti-counterfeiting. There's obviously trade secrets, there's design patents, there's other forms of intellectual property. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience when it comes to these other forms of intellectual property as they are important to the automotive industry?
Well, like you said, trademark law is the basis of all our brands. It's how we protect our names, how we protect, the products that we put out there. That's our name stands behind them. So we want to be able to defend that, and we don't want somebody to copy that and confuse consumers into thinking that something comes from our companies that doesn't. You talk about counterfeiting. There can be significant safety issues in counterfeited parts that we have seen. So not only is it to protect our name, it's to protect consumers from cheap knockoff parts or even parts that aren't going to work, including some safety features that are often counterfeited that would be very bad to get into the marketplace. So we want to be able to continue to protect in those areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would like to just, echo what Mark said there. A lot of people think the brand protection piece just comes in like, oh, Ford just doesn't want people using the Ford symbol because they want to make money. But it's really a safety issue almost all the time on brand protection side with the parts and the aftermarket industry, is that, our inventions, our parts have gone through rigorous testing, and, we know they're safe. And when someone's getting something they think is, from one automotive company and it's not tested, it didn't go through those same rigorous testing, it's a consumer safety thing. So that's a big point that is, and the brand protection team really wants people to be safe when they're buying parts from Honda, from Ford, from any other automaker.
Absolutely. So we are coming to the end of our time together. Just kind of curious, do either of you have any closing remarks you'd like to share with the audience? Mark?
Sure. I think patents are very important to our companies. They're very important to the founding fathers, who obviously put it into the Constitution, as a way to help inventors protect their inventions so that they can, promote their inventions without fear of being copied. It's something that has stood the test of time. And I think to the extent that we can continue to protect it and to continue to move the system forward to ensure that that view that the founding fathers had, it is just as important today as it was back then.
Great. Tom, anything from you?
I guess just to kind of reiterate, what I was saying before is that, it's a very unique time in the automotive industry right now. The amount of innovation and the resources that are being expended and used to innovate in the auto industry in terms of, both safety features, autonomous driving, EV transition, infotainment, packages, all this stuff. There's a lot of resources and a lot of innovation going right now. And the auto industry is a major player in this innovation, and the policies that are being enacted and considered in Congress or in committees right now really should be listening to us in the auto industry about what we have to say, is because we're really kind of the tip of the spear in this innovation in a lot of these areas. And vehicles are ubiquitous, and they're transporting precious cargo, people, our loved ones. And this is an area that we should be focusing on having our resources protected and letting us make sure we have a seat at the table and consider what policies are going into place to help us innovate and keep technology moving, safer, cleaner, and smarter.
Great. Well, I think those are both great notes to end on. Thank you both for being here. It was so great to hear your perspectives on intellectual property rights and how they protect advancements in automotive innovation. But as well, you both discussed how public policy plays a role in the development and deployment of cutting-edge mobility technologies. And we would like to thank all of you for joining us. We hope that you found this informative. Please stay tuned for the next edition of the Auto Innovators Future Driven Forum, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.